Hello, this is Shochi or Yochi, whichever you prefer. A cool person asked me to make a tutorial of how to make Uchiwa fans, so of course I immediately started to make one. This tutorial will be in 3 parts. 1. What is an Oshikatsu Uchiwa fan? 2. How to get inspiration to make Oshikatsu fans and the materials and images for crafting your Uchiwa fan. 3. How to put the Oshikatsu Uchiwa fan together. Each part will be posted separately on Instagram and maybe TikTok, unless you're watching this on YouTube, which has all 3 parts put together already. In that case, I'll put timestamps. Okay, now moving on to part 1. 1. What is an Uchiwa? An Uchiwa is just a handheld fan for keeping cool. It was originally known as Tuanshan and is originally Chinese. The Tuanshan was introduced to Japan from China during the Tang dynasty. Generalizing, there are 3 major types of Uchiwa fans. Boshu from Chiba, these are the very round, small Uchiwas, and are the best shape for if you're just getting started making Oshikatsu. Kyo from Kyoto are the most common shape for Oshikatsu, this slightly ovalish shape with a square top. It's the type you'll find in beginner cheaper kits. Marugame from Kagawa, these ones are the rarest and largest. It's not very common to see them in the Oshikatsu scene, but they definitely stand out when you come across them. Tihei are the most difficult to work with. The last bit of important Uchiwa history is, where does Oshikatsu relate to Uchiwa fans? I'll try to make this not too long because the answer is pretty straightforward. Uchiwa fans have always been used to display art, even before coming to Japan. China has a long history of beautiful decorative fans and the Tuanshan was no exception. But in Japan, the transition from illustrative fans to Oshikatsu fans started with first a transition to them being used as an advertising medium in the Meiji period for temples, shrines and companies. They are actually still used this way to this day. Here are 2 Uchiwa fans that I was handed just walking around Tokyo. They are pretty effective advertisements because people are less likely to throw them away since they are useful to beat the heat in Tokyo. I mean, it worked on me because I still have them. This paved the way for idol culture to use them to promote their favorite idols, or Oshis, in the 90s and 2000s. Most Oshi Uchiwas were simple then, just an I love you message or the idol's face and name, similar to posters at concerts. Over time, they have become more decorated and elaborate. All this led to Oshikatsu Uchiwa. Most of Oshikatsu culture is a continuation of Japanese idol culture, directed and multiplied with Japanese otaku culture. In this way, it's really a marriage of 2 subcultures all about love and devotion for something or someone you enjoy. So Oshikatsu Uchiwa are just the next logical step from there. I hope this wasn't too boring and awful. I'm sorry for how long this has been, but next I will move on to something you probably care about a bit more than this long history, which is how to get inspiration for your Uchiwa fan, as well as how to find images for it and what materials to use. Now it's time to tackle part 2. Part 2, Inspiration, Images and Materials. When it comes to your inspiration, the sky is the limit. Anything can be an Oshi and anything can have an Uchiwa made for it. Remember to not be too limiting to yourself. You don't have to make your Uchiwa fans like other people you have seen or like me at all. I personally have had a long history making crafts, and so outside of basic inspirations, I mostly don't look at other people's fans because I find that it makes me subconsciously copy them. The most important part to make you really love your fan and for it to turn out the best is to pour your own touch and life into it and fill it with your love for your Oshi. Now I will use myself as an example to hopefully give you ideas. My Kamiai Oshi is Len Kagamine, the Pirate Pro Vocaloid owned by Krypton Future Media. Krypton makes a lot of its money from collaborations with artists and brands for varying Vocaloid charms, badges and other merch. For these collabs, each of the main 6 Vocaloids usually has a distinct look and pose, and there are usually 1-3 different illustrations of these looks and poses. Other Len designs also come from modules in the Vocaloid rhythm games. I personally love fashion and have specific looks I love on Len, usually ones that align with my personal taste in fashion or aesthetics. Some Kagami Len looks I plan to make fans for have made fans for a meet and greet event Len from the event in Seoul, Korea earlier this year. Romantic Twin Star Len from 2025, which is another art collab, Flower Retro Len from this past February. 2025 Magical Mirai Len, Seal Module Len Descent by Air Komatsu from Project Diva, Len from the song Senbon Zakura by White Flame and Stylish Energy L Module, Len designed by Suyuki from Project Diva. This might seem like a long list, but I hope it shows the range you can really use to find with your Oshi to make Uchiwa for. When finding images to use, it's important to remember that you really have two choices. If you are selling them, you can really only use official merchandise like posters, flyers, clear files, or art you've drawn yourself somewhat ethically. Otherwise, you might get in trouble. But for personal use and enjoyment, it's fine to download images from artists to use. I tend to use not only official art from my source, but I will also go to the socials of the artists who illustrated the collaborations I like and see if they have extra sketches or drawings of those designs. I don't tend to use fan art of the designs unless I was to draw them myself. This is because I like a more cohesive look, and bringing in other artists can make things look more like a collage. It's good etiquette to credit the artist as well, especially if you are posting your fans online. Often I'll have to edit the art to format it to be useful on my Uchiwa fans. The edits usually include resizing, adjusting the resolution, cutting my Oshi out of group photos so I have him individually, and sometimes touching up line work or colors on sketches. I don't only rely on pictures the artists post on their socials, I also look at merch pictures on the websites they're for sale on. For older designs, I might even look on second-hand websites for photos people have taken. Good photos have high contrast with the image of your Oshi and the backdrop, good lighting and high resolution. For merch photos, there is a lot of cutting, cleaning and warping to do, which is why they're a little worse than raw artwork. The program I use is Clip Studio Paint, but Fire Alpaca is free and just as good for this specific purpose. I used it before I got Clip Studio Paint. Last for this part is materials. The absolutely necessary items for Oshikatsu fans are the fan's skeleton, glue and pictures of your Oshi. From there, anything can be used. From piercings to fabric, buttons, flowers, receipts, wrappers, ribbons, charms, lace, strong, anything you can think of. Most people use rhinestones, glitter paper, reflective tape, and ribbon. On websites like Taobao or Shopee, you can search for beginner kits for Uchiwa fans, but you don't have to look for kits specially. You can also look into kits or bundles for decorating top loaders or decoding kits. Next, we will move on to the more in-practice part of this tutorial. In order to make this tutorial as comprehensive as possible, I have decided to make a new Uchiwa fan alongside it, so you can better understand what I mean. The subject of this tutorial will be Len from the Happy Birthday to You Live and event. While I didn't personally get to attend, something that will haunt me to the end of my days, I love the fact that there was such a big birthday celebration for my Oshi, and am excited to create a fan for this live because of it. The first thing I do is hunt for images to use on the fan. This time I found useful ones on articles covering the live, the Vocaloid wiki, official announcements from Krypton on Twitter, and the promotional video on YouTube. I'll switch now to some footage of me fixing and adjusting the images. I have collected the images I will use into one file and am cleaning them up by erasing the backgrounds or details not related to Len. I can adjust the sizing necessary for the images by sight at this point, but try to keep what size you need and the size of your fan in mind. This file is a standard A4 paper size. As you can see, there are areas that were cut off on certain illustrations. Because of that, I am just drawing in the missing section by hand since it was simple. These kinds of measures are usually not necessary nowadays, but for older collabs or lesser funded ones it can be. Now I am arranging my cleaned up and adjusted images for exporting and printing. Yay! Also, I always make sure to print on a thin glossy paper. Next, we will move on to cutting the images out. That process will be filmed on my phone, so apologies in advance because I am not too good at filming. We have officially moved from my computer desk to my workshop desk. Here, I am first cutting all the images we printed out into large squares before I move on to die cutting. I find that this helps organize all of the images better, and more importantly, it helps with hand strain. Cutting the images out is definitely the most time-consuming part of the process, but it is the most important next to researching and finding the images. It's the way you get your subject on the actual fan. I feel like this is the step where people can go kind of wrong, so I want to pay special attention to it. When you cut your pictures out, please remember that you most likely have printed at home, which means even after you let the images dry, the paper is not ink fast. This is why I highly recommend sealing your images, but I'll discuss that in the next part. As for now, the important thing to remember is that as you hold your images and cut it, it's very easy to transfer the ink by rubbing, especially on images with a lot of black. You can't really tell here, but I am routinely taking the thumb I hold the pictures with and cleaning the ink off, so I don't smudge black all over Len's face. I use two different pairs of scissors, one is spring-loaded and one is just a normal pair. Spring-loaded scissors save your wrist and hand muscles from cramping. The cutting takes a long time. This cutting session took about 3 hours, so it's important to save your hand muscles wherever you can. As an artist, I am particularly worried about damage to my hands, but everyone should be careful to not strain their wrists. However, spring-loaded scissors, especially ones like the ones I have that are too big for me, are not very good for tight details. So for those, I switch to regular, finer tipped scissors. I have 5 pretty important tips for cutting things out. 1. Start from the smallest thing you have to cut out and work your way up, because cutting things stretches the muscles in the center of your hand, which many people don't use that often, so your hand can give out sooner than you think. So get the fine details out of the way while you have the hand strength for the required dexterity. Also, it gives you a chance to practice, so if you damage the prints, you don't mess up on images that require more printer ink. 2. When you cut, the best thing is to lead with your non-cutting hand, using it to turn the page however you need to, while slowly cutting with your other hand. This offers more control and allows you to make gentle curves instead of jagged corners. 3. Try to keep in mind a certain size you would like your white border to be and keep it in mind as you cut, to make it consistent all the way through your cutting, like a sticker. I'm actually quite bad at this, but I try my best. I think when I succeed doing this, the print ends up looking much better. 4. After you cut an image out, be sure to flip it over and study it from the other side. This allows you to see the silhouette of the print without all the details distracting you, which in turn allows you to see any jagged mistakes or random cuts that you can then repair. It's honestly not the most necessary thing to do, but if you want your cutouts to look perfect, this can definitely help. 5. Sometimes you will cut too far, whether cutting into the print or just ruining the white border you've worked really hard to make perfect. In this case, do not scrap the print. Just pull your scissors back immediately and adjust your cutting angle as if you didn't make the mistake and continue. Because you are gluing down the print, as long as it's not jagged or too big, most miscuts aren't noticeable, and as long as you pull back immediately, most prints can be salvaged in this way. You may have noticed that I printed out a lot of the same design, including some flipped versions. The reason I use flipped designs actually has 2 reasons. The first is if I am using a transparent fan, which I am not this time. It's so that I can line the designs up so that either way you flip the fan, the design is visible without a lot of extra blank white space. The other reason if I am not using a transparent fan is so that I can use the prints in more creative ways. When I create my fans, I do it like a collage, and I don't like being limited while I am creating it by not having enough prints or having them oriented in the correct way. Printing a few extras flipped or in different sizes or even on different paper can allow you to fill extra white space on your fans, both saving you some decorative elements you would have filled that space with otherwise, and also allowing you to fit your Oshi on the fan more times. I always have a few extras left over, but I much prefer having too many instead of not enough. After all, you can always repurpose the extras into other Oshikatsu crafts. Maybe one day I will make a fan of all the extras I have for Len. This time, I could tell I printed a few too many, and set the extras anew for sure I wouldn't use to the side in order to save hand strength. Finally, after 3 hours of snipping, we've reached the end of the cutting. Now we can get ready for the funnest part of this craft. It's finally time to enjoy the most fun part. Part 3, putting it all together. I previously went over different materials to use to decorate, so I won't go into details concerning where I source different things, but I will try to demonstrate the items I use and explain my general process. This part will mostly be a sped-up time-lapse of me putting together my Uchiwa fan and stopping the video every now and then to explain things. I'm a little nervous because this time I'm making my first ever Mega Kyo Uchiwa. I'm not sure the technical name, but it's the giant version of the ones I've used thus far. Here are some examples of just how big it is. Here's my OB11 body Len doll demonstrating. He's taller than a normal Nendoroid, so you can understand the scale. Here it is also next to a pen to demonstrate more. This is definitely going to be my biggest project yet, so no more stalling, let's get to business. Here is another shot of the size of the skeleton of this fan. Between how big it is and trying to record in a POV style, I am pretty sure I am going to be out of frame quite a bit. Apologies in advance. Now I am applying double-sided tape to either side of the fan. This adheres the paper that works as a canvas and also adds some thickness to the fan. It's later sealed with glue, so don't worry about it peeling off. The reason I prefer the tape over glue in this instance is because the tape helps fill the gaps between the bones of the fan, and it also can use its ability to be pulled taut on either side to add some structure to the fan, which is helpful considering how heavy it can get. Another tip for these big fans in particular, please make sure to store the skeleton somewhere completely flat so it won't get bent. The plastic used to make them is actually rather soft, and I learned the hard way that if it's stored on its side or any way other than purely flat, it will warp. If this happens, store it under something heavy laying flat for a day and it will go back to normal. Here I got out of frame a little, sorry, but I am still doing the same thing. A little hack: if you end up using the double-sided tape like I do, place the tape in alternating directions. I do one side up vertical and the other horizontal. This helps with structure also. Also, because the fan is curved, the ends of the tape will be angled after you cut them. You can make use of these curved ends by placing them along the opposite edge that you last cut on. It will match that curve. It helps to save you some wasted tape. Next, we will be placing the paper over the bones of the fan. The paper I use depends on what kind of design I do. This design is fairly print dense, so I chose a less thick paper to cover the fan. This is because the prints will also help hide the appearance of the bones of the fan. Using a thinner paper for backing reduces the weight, which is really important with a fan this size and with the amount of decorations we will be adding. We don't want to snap the handle. The angle here is really hard to record, so I think I'll have to trim the paper off camera, but I think that part is pretty straightforward anyway. Now that the paper is fully backing one side, a huge benefit of the double-sided tape comes into play. I am pressing down on the tape between the spines of the fan. This actually creates a shockingly large amount of sturdiness. Even as I'm doing this, the fan begins to feel so much less floppy. It's actually perfectly secure without glue, I think, but I'm really not willing to risk it, haha. Anyways, it takes a bit, but it's very worth it. Next, I will apply the second sheets of paper off camera, since it's really difficult, lol. A problem recording this I didn't anticipate is that the paper I had isn't quite big enough to cover the whole fan, causing me to have to use more than one and causing some gaping. I'll show you now. As I turn the fan here, you can see how much stiffer it is from all our structure-adding tactics. And here you can see the gaping I mentioned. I'll also pound out the rough edges that will be secured with glue. Please learn from my mistakes and get a paper that's big enough to cover the front of the fan. Or do what I'll do now to account for the lines. I am shifting around the mental map I had so that the prints I have hide them. This is another reason it's always important to print out extras. I am now securing the edges with hot glue. This adds a lot of weight, but also gives a good surface to apply our edge ribbon and makes sure our fan's paper will be essentially waterproof by the end of this. A pretty good trade-off, in my opinion. Here you can see the final result of the gluing. It's pretty rough, but that's okay, as it will be covered with ribbon by the end. Now it's time to remap the prints I prepared to cover those lines. Make sure to still be careful with your prints to not smudge the ink. This happens to me mostly because I use glossy paper, which I am considering stopping since I use laminate anyway. Anyways, to begin, I organize my prints into sets of the same design. This helps me make designs more easily because I can map things out by the size of the prints. Now for the actually arranging of the prints, try to remember what exactly you want to be the center of attention in the fan. I borrow a lot of the fundamentals of art for arranging these fans, so if you draw at all, you can borrow a lot of the rules around thumbnailing and framing your pieces for this. For me, on this front side, I really wanted the print of him lying back to be the main part. Luckily, it was also big enough to cover the gap in the paper. Also, keep in mind when you set up your layout, there is going to be some give and take. If you want a very print-heavy layout, where you care a lot about your different prints showing, you're going to have less embellishments as there just is less room for them. For this fan, that's probably for the best as embellishments are pretty heavy, but this is why sometimes it's better to have less prints and graphics overall. If you want a really Dakotan style fan, I suggest only using one print per side. Oh, and something I've already done but forgot to mention, because I use laminate, I highly suggest using a cheap glue stick to stick down your prints to your canvas paper. You want them stuck down well enough that they won't shift around at all while you apply the laminate. Laminate is a thin, in this case holographic, plastic film that is sticky on one side. It's similar to a phone screen protector and can waterproof and dirtproof your prints as well as make them glossy. Be careful applying it, you can't peel it up without ruining your print. With the glue, you also want it to be slow drying enough and not too sticky, so that if you need to adjust the overlapping edges of your prints or your positioning, you can do so. After trying lots of different glues, cheap glue sticks work best for me. Now I unfortunately have to place the laminate on off camera. It's very difficult for me even on smaller fans, and messing it up can ruin the print. But the best way to do it is using the hinge method you use to apply flexible screen protectors. Please look up the hinge method to apply phone screens on YouTube and you should find something useful. Next though is sticker time. This is my sticker collection, and now I'll go through it to find any sticker that might work for this fan. As I said before, with this being a print-heavy fan, I probably won't use very many stickers, so I will probably only use small ones or not many at all. Just remember, the stickers go on before you apply laminate so that they can also be protected. Also, stickers are very hard to glue on properly, and the adhesive isn't very good usually. I actually did end up getting some shots here of me trying to apply the laminate. It's not the complete footage, but it should give you an even clearer idea of how applying it works. Now it's time to decide the print layout for the other side. On this side, I wanted the focus to be more evenly distributed between all of the cute designs. That's why I printed so many smaller ones. I also tried printing out the background I am using here. I thought it would decorate the space in a more subtle way that using other 3D decorations would, since there is so many prints. I think it accomplishes that well. Going forwards, I definitely do it again. After I glue the prints down in the corrected layout, I apply the laminate off-screen. Here is what the prints and stickers look like underneath the laminate. The effect is quite subtle this time, as to not detract too much from the already very busy print design. I quite like that the holographic effect resembles fireworks. After all, this fan is to celebrate Len's birthday. Now it's time to finally add the decorations. It took me a little bit to choose a proper lace border, but I eventually picked a more traditional one. I really like how it looks. It makes the massive fan ever bigger. So cute. I also took advantage of the extra badge sleeves I ordered to display a badge. The badge I am using now is a placeholder to make sure the glue doesn't warp the plastic, but I plan to put a badge from the live on there eventually. I ended up using silver and yellow ribbon, one on either side. I usually use brighter colors or pastels to decorate, so I'm excited to finally get to use the silver ribbon I've had lying around. To be honest, I probably should have used the silver on both sides to use it up. I also managed to use some stiff lace trim to make a bow for the center. Usually I'd use it for the edges, but I think it looks good. This is another fun part of making these fans, finding creative ways to use different supplies. Now I am just adding some cabochons and charms. I'm intentionally adding little pops of blue to break up the yellow and make Len really pop, as well as some sunflowers here and there. I add a jewelry chain with stars and rhinestones across the center to make some fun noise when it flaps, but I did tack down the center of it with glue so it doesn't move too wildly. On the front side, I lined the edges with pearls and made sure to use charms in the same blue color as the ribbon on Len's jacket. But as far as finishing touches go, I think that does it. Finally, after basically a week of work, we're all done. Here are the beauty shots. I'll be sure to post more up-close pictures soon, but I really wanted to get this out as soon as possible. I hoped I answered most of your questions and that this was informative and useful. Feel free to comment any more questions and anything I missed. Let me know if you want tutorials for anything else. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed. Have a great Len day. Bye-bye.